You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 264, Echoes of Mortis Part 2. Tonight, we're going to be wrapping up our coverage of this key story arc from Season 3 of the Clone Wars, breaking down the Father, the Chosen One prophecy, Anakin, and a whole lot more. But before we do, please welcome Jonesy back to the show. And Jonesy, I know it seems like it's been a week since we last did this, but you were only off the scopes for a moment there. So welcome back, sir. How are you doing?
Appreciate it, man. I'm doing great. This is really exciting. This has been an exciting day.
Exciting day.
And it's going to kick off an exciting several weeks, I think, for us here.
Yeah, things are starting to get real, especially with Celebration, which is going to be the very first thing we're going to talk about tonight when we get into the news, which is right now. So
nice segue.
Yeah, nice segue. Let's plan that. But yeah, like it's, I don't know, it's social media has just been crazy the last 2, 3, 4 hours because they finally announced officially the all 24 podcasts that would be featured on the podcast stage at Celebration in Chicago. And yes, we are on that list. So I know, I guess this is the official thing, right? That we're on there. So the whole list is out there. I know you and I we kind of compiled our own list from the emails that were going out prior to this, but having seen this full comprehensive list now of the 24 shows, are there any shows in there that stand out for you? Anything that you're going to try to catch while we're there?
Well, I'm definitely going to try to go see our friend Becca with Tarkin's Top Shelf, of course, Star Wars novels. Really excited to meet her and listen to their show live. But yeah, there's a couple others I've always been really curious about, like Star Wars Minute, and of course our friends from Coffee with Kenobi, pardon me, of Mike's longtime friend. So excited to meet some of these folks. And kind of in my old days, I would do a Star Wars collection, or I did a lot of collecting. So Star Wars Action News, I used to meet those guys up in Plano, and so they've got a podcast, and they're formally on the collecting side. So
I didn't realize they're in Dallas, or up there by Dallas. Sorry,
no, I don't think they are. They're actually in somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember, like Indiana, I think, Indiana or Illinois, right? But they would come down every once in a while to do that, and they had some folks in Oklahoma, a really good group. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Arnie and Marjorie again, see if they remember me or not. It's been a long time. But how about you? Any of these really jumping out to you? There's so many great ones here.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
hard to just pick a few.
Yeah, Star Wars Bookworms is one that I've been just listening to recently. But to be honest, there's so many of these that I know have great, fans, listeners. They've got huge followings. So I don't know. I'm actually trying to figure out if I can work in some time prior to the show. I'd like to listen to some of these shows, the episodes prior to Celebration, so that when I get there, I'm not like, oh yeah, cool show, I've never heard it. I definitely want to hear these because my plan is to just meet all of these folks because we're amongst really great shows here. So, it's a pleasure and honor to be on that stage with all 23 of the other shows and the creators and the talent behind all of those as well. So,
yeah, and there's going to be so many other of the podcast group from the Star Wars community that are going to be out there as well that aren't on the stage, and a number of other fantastic shows as well. So it's going to be really cool just to hopefully rub elbows with people and have a little networking opportunity. And you and I are pretty new to this space, so a lot of the folks that have been doing this for a number of years, it'd be good to introduce ourselves and say hi and kind of maybe wiggle our way into the community a bit.
Yeah. And it's funny too, because prior to doing the show, I listened to lots of podcasts, and ever since doing the show, and it's not even a time thing, I've been real hesitant to listen to any podcast Star Wars related, only because I just I don't know. It gets to me where I start to feel like, are these my own thoughts? Am I really conveying my true feelings, or is this me just regurgitating what I've heard on another show? And so I've gone pretty much cold turkey. There's very few shows that I actually listen to. And to your point, a lot of the shows that are still my favorites that I just couldn't bear to let go, having done this show, are not even on the podcast stage. So I've got plenty of other shows that I and creators that I want to touch base with at some point there that I know are going to Celebration.
Yeah,
but
it's going to be fun.
Yeah,
it's going to be a great 5 or 6 days. So we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah. So on that note, just as a reminder, if you guys head out to eargluemedia.com/SWCC, We'll put that link in the show notes. That's where you guys can kind of sign up to let us know that you're going to be there at Celebration. I know we've got a few people that have already done so we're kind of trying to put together a list of everyone who is planning to meet up there. And I think we're trying to plan again. I think we've mentioned this in the show, but we're trying to plan something where we can get a get together one night or I don't know, during the day or something, just some way to kind of, touch base with the listeners and the supporters there. So what else are we asking for there on that form?
Yeah, on the form, it's basically just your name, your email address, and which days you're going to be there.
Yeah.
And the email is just so we can know how to get in touch with you. And so drop us a line, let us know. And as we get the schedule lined up, we'll start sending out emails, everything we, BCC'd. So you're not going to have to worry about sharing your information or anything like that. So privacy is important to us here at the Cantina Cast.
And Earglue Media Network.
And Earglue Media. Yes, I guess I have to kind of support the parent.
Yeah. And we've got some swag in the works. So I've got a couple of things going right now. I've got some proofs coming in that I've ordered for some different things. I don't want to announce just yet because I don't know which ones are going to suck and which ones are going to be great. But whatever the ones are great, we'll go with. So it may be T-shirts, it may be stickers. I don't know just yet. So we'll have something planned as giveaways as well when we get there. So again, sign up, let us know you'll be there, and maybe we'll hold some of that for you.
So are you preparing some of that sweet new Celebration logo you made us?
Yeah.
So check that out on social media if you haven't already. Albert redesigned our Cantina Cast logo to include the city of Chicago and some fun stuff there. So a nice little variation of our typical Cantina Cast logo, and did an awesome job. Looks great.
Thanks. Yeah, it was fun. It was good. I like the way it came out. So, all right. Well, enough about Celebration. Otherwise, it was pretty light. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, a lot of rumors. Yeah, it was mostly rumors, right? And a lot of folks chattering about wrapping up episode 9 and at different stages. So a lot of the different actors, some people that were in the crew have now allegedly posted on Reddit saying we're done, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of chatter around that. Probably safe to say that they are in the final stages of wrapping primary shooting. So that's all good news.
What'd you think of Anthony Daniels' post? And pretty somewhat heartfelt, goodbye to the character.
Yeah, it was. And it sent kind of a shockwave because people were, I guess, reading into what he had written as though, C-3PO was gone at the end of 9 for whatever reason or wasn't going to be around. But I didn't take it that way. I think it was just him parting with the character that he had been part of for, 40 something years now.
Yeah, we have to remember Anthony Daniels is 72 years old, I believe.
Yep.
So he's been doing this for a really long time. He's appeared in every Star Wars movie as some character.
Right.
And that's really impressive. But it's kind of sad, though. I mean, it's sad that the old guard is changing, and it's nice that they acknowledge that as well. And I know Anthony Daniels sometimes has caught a little bit of slack for maybe being a little too, playing the uptight English butler, maybe a little too much on us. But you know what? I mean, he's been a stalwart. He's always been available and accessible for fans. And so it's going to be tough to see these folks not be involved anymore. But it was nice to see him acknowledge that on social media. I thought that was nice.
Yeah. And he's one of those actors that I can't think of any time where C-3PO wasn't present, whether it be a movie, cartoon, television, commercials, specials, promos, anything that had a Sesame Street, whatever you want, cameos, right? He was always C-3PO. They never had another person come in and then do a dubbed over voice or someone else that could impersonate his voice in any way. I mean, he this is his character. This is his body of work is C-3PO. He lived the life of C-3PO. So, I mean, that just says a lot about him and just how dedicated and how committed he was to the character, which I think is very commendable. And, and to be honest, at this point, even let's say Anthony Daniels, walked away from the role altogether right now. I mean, we don't physically see him, so it wouldn't be hard to fill him in, and it wouldn't be hard to get a voice actor to come in. So for anyone and I'm saying this just for anyone that feels or has fear that we may never see C-3PO again, that's probably not going to happen. I think C-3PO is still going to, apart from something happening horribly in episode 9, which I don't anticipate happening, he's going to be around for some time. I think it'd be hilarious if they ended 9 with him getting wiped all over again. Wipe his memory, and he gets to start anew, and R2 gets to keep all. It'd
be kind of bittersweet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but and you're definitely not taking away from anything. He created that character. He is the character. All the mannerisms, the voice, voice inflection, even the humor that we like, at least, he brought all that to life. So really, yeah, well-deserved retirement from that character if that's what he's choosing to do. And yeah, we'll have to see what the movie actually holds for him. Maybe he'll have a heroic send-off. Who knows?
And then the last thing we got was Jon Favreau on Instagram posted an image that, man, got everybody excited because R5-D4.
Dude, he did. Man, he lives.
He does live. So
it's exciting,
R5-D4 is, I guess, going to be in The Mandalorian. So for those of you that didn't follow, what was it, Certain Point of View, there is a story in there where it kind of, you get to see and hear, I don't know if you see or hear the right words to use, but you get R5-D4's perspective on, what, him meeting R2-D2 and R2-D2 inspiring him to blow his motivator. All right. We get some backstory there, and that it really wasn't just him being a faulty robot, that he purposely did that because he knew that there was a greater mission in R2 that he needed to fulfill. The Force kind of spoke to him. Right. So all of that, I'm just saying, because it was a very cool story. I know there were some people didn't like it and thought, well, it shouldn't have been that way. It was a Force, that kind of thing. But really, I thought it was a great little story, and it was one of my favorites. It was one of the standouts for me, at least in that particular novel. But I thought that was going to be the last we'd ever see of him, honestly, ever again. I thought, that's kind of cool. They threw him a bone, and I don't know, maybe it was that story. Maybe it was just Favreau's love for the character and from the original movie, but we got him coming back in Mandalorian. Now, to what capacity, we don't know. It really is just a picture. Right. He looks like he's seen better days. Honestly, he's really
a little worse for wear.
A little worse for wear. I mean, he's like at bucket level at this point. So,
but this is 10 years or so after we saw him blow his top. Yeah. So, I mean, not too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, R2's looked worse, right?
True.
So it's
RC-3PO has too. Yeah, he'd been in parts. So
yeah. So all things considered, he's doing all right.
All right. Yeah. So I don't know. Any thoughts on? Do you think he's going to be like a main staple character, or is this going to be like a cameo thing?
I think this is just a cameo thing. It seems unlikely the droid would be a major part of this TV show, but who knows? It's just cool. I hope it's more than just a background or a passing thing. Maybe he's in there and they don't have to call him by name or by number or anything like that. But just something fun. I think these are cool though. We've talked about this before. Tying the old world to the new world and telling a new story, but still grounding it with what, brought us a lot of joy over the last, 40 years. I like that stuff. So by all means, go ahead. We don't have to go and rewrite history or anything like that, but, make it fun. Encourage the old guard to come along with you. And, this is a great way to doing that.
Agreed. All right. Well, let's pick up where we kind of left off last episode. So this is, again, part 2 of our Mortis coverage here on the Cantina Cast. And just to kind of recap, in last episode, we really kind of sat down and talked about, Mortis itself. We talked about the daughter and the son and did some scene quote analysis. We try to get in the head of some of these characters, or at least those two, at some points. And we're going to kind of pick up and do the same thing here going into this second part of the episode. Today, we're going to focus really on the father, talk a little bit about Anakin Skywalker and the Chosen One prophecy and how that relates to Mortis in itself. And then, I thought we could maybe just kind of wrap things up by talking about, briefly touching with the balance of the Force, Qui-Gon Jin, and then the legacy of Mortis. So what have we had since this particular arc? And is there anything that we think we may see in the future related to that? So let's start with the father, because the father he's a very deep character. And much like we did with the first 2 characters, I just kind of want to start with the physical appearances and the characteristics, because he's got a very unique look to him. He's almost more blocky. And I don't know if this was a conscious animation design or a thought or whatever, but he is much more blocky looking, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but if nothing else, it gives him that sense of a frailty. He looks weathered. He almost comes across as like this Gandalf the Grey character, which I'm not sure if that's what they were going for with his look, but if so, that would be the second Lord of the Rings reference in this episode, the first being the Sun's Cathedral, which was modeled after Saruman stuff, but yeah. So anyways, that look, and then in the tall hat and everything, he's just got a very unique look. He doesn't look like many other characters or any other characters that come to mind immediately, right? With the son, you look at him and you go, he's Sith. You look at the daughter and you think, okay, she's, I don't know, angelic or royalty or something, right?
Right.
But he's just very odd. He doesn't look to me like a Star. And this is not a critique. He's just different. He looks very different. And maybe that's the case in point there. So,
it really reminds me of the old, the old mentors of the samurai movies and the old Japanese style movies that were really influential on George Lucas in particular. In the same style, just the beard and the mustache, the long beard, very, contemplative, if you will, really thought about things before he said, and had this very noble view of how everything worked and the balance between it all and the way that it flowed. And, just kind of understood everything, understood his place, understood the place of everyone else and what should or shouldn't happen. So it really reminded me of the old sage, again, Lord of the Rings type of references where, they just know all these things already. And you're right, the complexion of his skin, when I paused the video as I was watching it, and you could see it's really like this dark, not freckles, but almost like when people sometimes get older and their skin starts to have more blemishes, like the dark spots and things. You could actually see a lot of that throughout his cheeks. And you could tell that something wasn't quite right. And it was a little more than just age or weathering of the skin. And when he finally said he was dying, it made a lot more sense. And that look really came together. But yeah, the long flowing robes. One of the things I liked about the father, and the daughter did this a little bit too, although not as front and center on the screen, is the way that they rise from a meditation and seated position. It's just very graceful, like they're using the Force to actually lift themselves up out of that position. And it's just this really smooth, graceful motion. But I thought that was just really cool and just a unique characteristic that really showed you the characters are something special and something really unique from what we've seen elsewhere.
Yeah. That's a good, I need to go back and look at that. And that's the one thing, and I don't want to stray too far. I want to make sure we stick with the father here, but the Mortis arc, I think we touched on this just briefly in the last episode, but it just seems like every time you watch this, there's just something else, whether it's a line or an inflection or, the subtle things like you just mentioned, them getting up. I didn't never notice that before.
And it's every single time he stands up. I'm not joking. It's every single time. Even when he's a little weak, he still does it that way. I mean, not when he's sprawled out on the ground, but even when he's a little weaker later on, he still has this grace to him. It's every single time. It's really, the details are really pinpoint.
So going back to just another characteristic, or maybe, I don't know if this is, I guess you wouldn't call it a characteristic so much as, I guess, an identity for himself. It's interesting that he refers to himself and his family as anchorites. And if you go out to StarWars.com, they've got a really cool thing that they call the episode guide. So you can follow along with all the Clone Wars and Rebels episodes, and it gives you some trivia, some background information. But there was one thing that kind of was very interesting, because they do make reference to the fact that he refers to him and his family as anchorites. And it says, this uncommon word, never before spoken in Star Wars, is someone who is withdrawn from society to become somewhat a religious hermit. Does that describe anyone else that you can think of in the Star Wars universe?
Oh yeah, it sounds like Yoda in particular, right?
Yoda, or even Luke, right?
Yeah, Luke. I mean, you could throw Obi-Wan in there a bit.
Yeah.
So there's a few characters that fit that mold.
Yeah, and we'll come back to, I don't know, if I remember to tie that back, we can talk about it. Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Right, and as you think about the actual definition of anchorites, it also references exile, and it also as an atonement of sorts as well. So you are withdrawn and we see this even in the Vader comic, we saw this with, what was his name? Infilla, right? Where he had to withdraw, and it was his punishment or whatever it was, in order, to withdraw and focus on the Force until Vader came and found him. And so this really called back to that. I mean, this prefaced that obviously, but it still reminded me of that type of thing. And it was very appropriate word, I think, for what this is, where they intentionally withdrew to meditate on the Force, but also to contain and control themselves and also protect themselves. It's also a protection methodology in order to prevent others from trying to abuse their power or influence them in some way.
Right. And for him, it was, self-serving in controlling, ensuring that someone couldn't control him, but then he also had his son and daughter that he was trying to keep in check. But more on that later. Right. Let's talk about his powers and abilities, because we talked about the beast forms that both the son and the daughter had in the last episode. But we should note the father doesn't have a beast form. However, he does sprout wings, and I think we see that at least twice in there as well. But any theory or thoughts as to why he didn't have a bestial form and he was just kind of himself? Is that just natural, or is that some another reference to him being balanced in some way?
I think it was just something to make him unique. I couldn't have, if I was to think what would he transform into, I think it's one of these things you don't need to. When you're that age, you don't have to manifest yourself in some other way. To me, that seemed like a bit of a youthful thing to do, of transforming yourself into another object or morphing into that or whatever you want to call it, and then attacking something or using that for motion. But his wings did remind me of a Pegasus, though, which I thought was still a bit appropriate for his status in the family. And just the way that they were, I mean, you might see they were somewhat angelic, but to me, it seemed a bit more Pegasus-like, at least what I'm envisioning of Pegasus wings in my head.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think you're probably right there. I think it was just a more practical approach for him in his age that, I don't need all that fancy stuff, right? It's got four wheels and, it goes in drive. That's all I need. I don't need the fancy stuff. Right. Yeah, and then I guess the one thing that probably stands out above all else with his powers is we see him grab the lightsaber without issue. I mean, he pulls basically a Satil Shan for lack of a better reference, but he's able to just kind of take the blade and push it. Literally, he kind of makes this motion that he pushes in on Anakin's lightsaber and extinguishes it that way. So yeah, again, we know that their force powers are unrivaled, and they are, for lack of a better term, gods. And so we saw this earlier with the son in the episode in Overlords, and I think is it an altar? No, sorry. Yeah, I think it's an altar, the second one, that we see him and Anakin together where he does that to him. So very powerful force users, right? Or force wielders, I guess, in that regards. Anything else that kind of stood out? I mean, I think we'll probably touch on the other things here and there, but anything else that stands out there?
Yeah, he only really showed us one other major power, and we're going to get to that later on in the show. But aside from being defensive against the sun, we really didn't see any evidence of other force powers, which again speaks to his status, where he doesn't need to exhibit what he's capable of doing.
So I threw this question out here, and I'm not trying to start anything.
This made me think.
I'm not trying to start anything. This is just a conversation, folks. But I threw the question out there, was the father a chosen one as well? So the reason I put that out there, only because I think it's an interesting concept that we've seen in other lores. And the most recent relevant one is the Matrix trilogy, if you're a follower of that, where Neo was not just the only chosen one. He was the most recent version in a long history of chosen ones that were kind of going through this. They were having to come in whenever humanity needed them to save them, right? And in Star Wars, we've never really had anything. So the theory here being that there is a long line of chosen ones that surface every 2,000 years or whatever makes sense. That anytime the Force or the galaxy is completely out of balance or needs to be put in balance or needs to ensure that balance persists and stays, that the Force somehow manifests these chosen ones over time. The only reason I say that is because if the chosen one is able to bring balance to the Force and be able to hold the daughter and the son in check, I mean, you could theorize from that he is a chosen one, or it could just be as simple as, well, he is the father, and as such, he's got some, physical relationship with obviously his own children, and that alone allows him to keep them in check without necessarily being deemed a chosen one or having to fulfill some kind of a prophecy. But anyways, what did that do for you outside of screw you over? I'm thinking.
Yeah, I had to think really hard about it for a few minutes. I think the interesting part is there's more questions about it, I think, than answers. And one of the first ones is, well, he has children. Mm-hmm. And so presuming that he was probably more in the Jedi space than anything else, which if I recall, is true, then why would he have children? And that seems, even with the history of what we know of thousands of years previous to the timeline that we're mostly accustomed to talking about, that doesn't seem typical or normal of why he would have had children. I think this is still more of a keeping the family in balance, and they knew they were special. I don't think he's the chosen one, because why would you have two chosen one at the same time?
Mm-hmm.
And I know we are flexible with time on Mortis a bit, but it just seems a little odd that you would have overlapping. And I'm having like Highlander flashbacks of sorts. But yeah, for some reason, spend too much time with you, I think.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of like, I get the passing of the torch and the passing of the guard, but it seems, I don't know, if there was someone who would be in tune with the chosen one and the prophecy, it seems like it would be someone else who had gone through that or experienced that or been aware of it. But it seems unlikely to me that we would equate this with the father specifically. I don't really have a great reason, because I haven't been able to think all the way through it. And this is more of a group discussion thing, I think, where we all throw a ton of ideas on the table and figure out what that really looks like. And I think you could definitely go either way, but there's a lot of gaps too of really understanding what the chosen one means. You got to answer all of that first and then try to play back and fill in a bunch of gaps with this family.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea for the sake of the saga, because it just means that, okay, maybe Rey is a chosen one, and that may be too soon, but, later on they could rehash this whole storyline and say, okay, we're going to fast forward 1,000 years, and here's what's happened in those 1,000 years, and oh, look, we have a chosen one again, and, make it, put a spin on the whole prophecy if they wanted to. So anyways, it's good for the franchise. I think what it does, though, it does take some of the luster and the shine away from Anakin and his uniqueness as the chosen one, as we know it, right? So there's some good.
Generally speaking, I don't have a problem with it though. If they were to come out and say, yeah, 2,000 years ago he was, and Anakin's the next iteration of that, it wouldn't rub me the wrong way if they did that. Do I prefer that? Maybe not.
Yeah,
but it, like you said, it's more of a lineage type of thing at that point, and it just opens a whole other box of questions.
Yeah, and there's another crazy theory I got too about Mortis, which we won't get into now, and that's whether or not the events that happen on Mortis are actually happen 2,000 years ago, or do they happen in the timeline of the Clone Wars? But anyways, more on that some other day. All right, so next question, I guess, for the father is: did he misread the prophecy as well, or is his interpretation just different? Because he says the chosen one will remain to keep my children in balance. And I suppose at this point, if he believed that balance existed because he, the father, was keeping the children in check, and then the prophecy simply stated that the chosen one would bring balance to the Force, from his point of view, ensuring Anakin stayed on Mortis would be fulfilling the prophecy, right?
Yes.
So I don't know. It's what we know from the original trilogy, or from the prequel trilogy, that seems to be not complete. It doesn't line up, I guess. It's either he knows more about the prophecy, or he's misreading the prophecy, which is another debate, another topic that we can talk about at some point on this show or whenever, right? But it just seems like who the hell really knows what this prophecy is? Like, it seems like there's a lot of different variations and a lot of different interpretations, which really kind of goes back to the whole premise of, from a certain point of view and all that, one of these, central themes to Star Wars. But anyways, the question really is about whether or not did Anakin need to be there? Does in the father's eyes, in order to fulfill the prophecy, is it more than just bringing balance to the Force, or is it bringing balance to the Force by staying on Mortis and keeping his son and daughter in check?
Yeah, I mean, he firmly believes that, regardless of how true it is.
Sure.
He firmly believes that if his children go out, they will sow an imbalance, and we can call it chaos with the son, because I think that's what definitely would have happened. So I think that's firmly what he believes. And if Anakin doesn't stay, then he feels, he won't be able to maintain it, and they're going to find a way to, do things that they should not do, to paraphrase what he's, said to his son. So I think that's kind of where we're at with that. I think he read it a certain way. I'm actually more curious about who actually remembers this family. Is that a Yoda, or is there someone else who's been around for as long as Yoda, or something close to where they actually remember this family and be able to put them into context of the history of where they fit with the Force, or fit with the Jedi, or what that story looks like more completely.
So speaking of Yoda, I'm going to interject this just really quickly. At the very beginning of Overlords, when Yoda is with Obi-Wan and they're talking about the mission, and he leaves Yoda, he walks away from Yoda to get on board the ship and take off, right? Yoda has the weirdest look on his face. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but go back and watch. It's almost like he's looking away like, I think I may know what they're talking about, or I think I may know what this means, or, that kind of a thing. So I'm with you there. I don't know that Yoda maybe knows them per se, but if there's any one particular person in that Jedi Order that may know of Mortis, or at least know about the son, the daughter, Celestials, it's got to be that guy. And you got to think that as old as Yoda is, 2,000 years ago, he probably remembers the last time this happened. That this distress call was used. So, who knows, right? I'm speculating on quite a bit.
We've always equated Yoda to being somewhat of a historian of the Force and of the Jedi as well, right? So it seems likely that if someone were to know, it would likely be him. Even though we have librarians and other historians, we still want to believe with his age, experience, and knowledge that he would be the one to actually be able to put one-on-one together and start to postulate what the possibilities might mean for something like this.
Yeah.
Now, granted, out in the middle of space, this is not where Mortis really is, right? And where they encounter the planet isn't potentially where they actually are. As I think they're really out in wild space, something along those lines, right? But they encounter in the outer rim. So there's this really weird space-time thing going on out there too. So the place and time may have thrown Yoda for a slight confusion, but clearly he knows something's up. And whether it's curiosity or concern or has an idea of actually what they're getting into, a little unclear. But there's definitely something he knows or he's thinking he's not saying.
Right. Yeah. Go if you, not you, but anyone else listening to the show, go take a look at his eyes. The eyes give everything away. Okay, so I don't want to turn this into a what if episode again, but the question of whether or not, what would the fate of the galaxy be had the father died? And I think it's safe to say that the son would have found a way off the planet. I mean, he had already called for help after Ahsoka sabotaged the ship, right? So my guess is by leaving the planet, he probably would have become powerful on the dark side, more powerful than he already was, amassed an army and simply kind of just, was hell-bent on conquest and taking over the galaxy. I think this, of course, would have thrown the balance of the Force too far in one side. But knowing what we know, do you think the Force would have self-corrected in some way?
It would have had to. I mean, that's just the way this works. Yeah. And every time one entity or the other gets too powerful, it's this concept of light and darkness chasing each other in this, cosmic circular pattern. And I think that was one of the things these episodes really did nicely. And we're going to talk a little bit more here in a few minutes of. But you really do get this visual aspect of light and dark constantly chasing one another. And I think that's how we view the Force in a grander scale, in a more, less time constrictive view, where eventually things swing around, right? So something becomes more powerful that it should not in one way or another, and it has to correct itself. And then the other side rises up and starts to compete. And we've got some variations, and we had a great conversation in Discord about what balance means. And I'd like to get into that a little bit later with what Utini's thoughts were there. But I think in general, that's what we have. So at some point, the Force is going to have to correct itself, or correct what's happening. That's corrupting the general pattern of the Force. Maybe a different way of putting it.
Yeah. If you were to tease that out even a little bit further, right? So you've got now the son aligned with Anakin. They're out and about during the midst of the Clone Wars, wreaking havoc, assuming power and control. You got to wonder, okay, so what's, where does Palpatine fit in on this, right? I think you get a very different series of events that occur both from Anakin and Palpatine's perspective. But I think one of the big questions then becomes, okay, so you've got Palpatine, who we know him very well in terms of his motivations, what drives him, that kind of thing. But you got to wonder if he would see the son as an enemy, or would he try to align with him to kind of leverage his power? And you would think that that's got to be temporary, right? At some point, he's going to use him, much like he used Vader, much like he used Anakin, much like he used everyone and anyone to get where he is. But I can't see Palpatine just being okay with this new kid in town, right? Someone new on the block that's kind of taken over.
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
he's no longer an apprentice.
Right.
Let's just put it that way. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it's a great scenario to play out, and we don't really have the time to do it now, but that's a really interesting one about what that would have looked like, either conflict or alignment there.
Yeah, definitely.
Visit us at Discord. Let us know what you think.
Right. All right. So another characteristic of him is this whole concept of having, I guess, I don't want to call it a power cell, but he's got some way that he powers the daughter and the son. And we mentioned this in the last episode, but I do find it fascinating that there's this physical bond between the father and his children where he acts as that power source to them. I mentioned it as kind of a ripcord or a fail-safe option for the father in the event that if the children ever went too far, one side or the other, he could just die and ultimately kind of depower them down. But I don't know. It's an interesting take on this kind of. I don't think we have anything that's even close to this in Star Wars, right?
Right.
And we got to see it obviously at the very end when he sacrifices himself, and which depowers his son, and then Anakin kills his son, that kind of thing. But the other thing, I guess that kind of in that same vein is this whole father-son relationship, because yet again we have another father and son relationship that's troubled in Star Wars. But I think there was a miss here in this arc that we didn't really get so much from the father and the daughter relationship, which I really think about a lot about, to be honest, and maybe more so now that we've, as preparation for these shows. But I really have been trying to think more about what that relationship was like, because we don't really get much of it. But anyways, so any thoughts around the whole symbiotic relationship or metaphysical relationship that they have in terms of powering the children, or the relationships between the father and son, or the father and the daughter?
Yeah, I got to be honest, that part of it really didn't jive for me, that he would depower. That seemed, like you said, for a failsafe, it seems like you've got other options. So I'm gonna go a little out here and say, again, we talked a little bit about this last week. The properties of this magical sword, I'm assuming, have some sort of special effect on these three. Otherwise, why would it be there, right? And then why would the daughter make a big deal about it? Not only for killing, but for maybe depowering, or for, even if it's temporary or something like that, of having some sort of effect on these beings. And it was created for this purpose, to give them an option to keep them in check. And so I'm going to equate it somewhat to the sword rather than the father giving his children the power, because again, he was going to die. Why was he so concerned about sowing destruction across the galaxy should things get out of balance? So those two things don't really line up for me in that context for him dying. And so I'm going to go to the sword and say the sword was really the catalyst of either taking away the power, or this was all a ruse and he tricked his son for the ultimate betrayal at the end, where Anakin, runs them both through. So
final answer, or you want to phone a friend?
No, I'm going to say the sword is, what is a sword?
All right. Yeah, fair enough. We're channeling the basement again. All right. So I guess the other thing I want to talk about with the father is his death and final words. And I'm probably going to cut into some of the Anakin stuff here a little bit, but it's, he dies saying, "You will do it again for the galaxy, but beware of your heart." So before we go any further, because I think do we have somebody? No, I'm sorry. I'm getting mixed up here. I thought we had someone that was in Discord actively watching these right now, so I didn't want to ruin anything. But anyways, he tells him to beware of his heart, right? Because he's foreseen Anakin's future, and yet he's, I guess, trying to ensure that he's careful of following his heart. It's very different than the advice that Shmi gives him, right? And asking Anakin to look to his heart for answers. Right. And I've got this whole thing I want to talk about a little bit later about just that, really, about following his heart, because I think this speaks or codifies Anakin's fundamental and inherent issue that, for me, is the root cause of all of this. He loves people. He loves with all his heart, and this comes from a very innocent and a very good, like, nurtured, natured place, right? But following his heart and wanting to help other people turns into such an emotional connection for him that he's unable to disconnect, which then turns into fear, which fear leads into hate, hate leads into suffering. So It's interesting that that he makes this comment and he's being told to beware of his heart, and yet the main person that Anakin loves prior to Padme has always kind of guided him in the opposite direction and to follow his heart. And so, and that's kind of led him astray as well.
Right. And we see this with Obi-Wan and Luke in the original trilogy as well, when they're talking and he says his feelings, Obi-Wan tells Luke, your feelings do you credit, but they could be made to serve the Emperor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really along the same exact path where they serve you, they benefit you because they keep you, they keep you grounded. They keep you this human. They keep the goodness in you of wanting to help. And we've talked about Anakin in this way a number of times where we think fundamentally he's not a bad person. He wants to help, but then he can't help but, get attached to things and not want to lose them and not let go and not accept the will of the Force or this circle of, the cosmic force type of thing, the circle of life, if you want to call it that. And I think that's the type of warning that Obi-Wan had witnessed in Anakin and wanted to share with Luke as well. And I think those are important things. And this speaks to balance again, right? Of being able to use your feelings, use your heart, use the things that make you a good person and continue to do the right things with them rather than going and trying to force that will upon other people and influence what they want to do and be so afraid of losing things that you lash out and that you behave in ways that are counter to what that balance is trying to tell you.
That particular that last moment, those fleeting words of, you'll do it again for the galaxy, beware of your heart. I mean, I just kind of saw that as a way for the Father to kind of let Anakin know that, yes, you are going to save the galaxy. You are going to fulfill the prophecy. However, there's going to be a huge price, to pay before that can happen. In other words, hey, dude, it's going to suck and you're going to bottom out, but trust me, you're going to do great in the end, right? He's almost kind of, I guess you could look at it that way too, is he's really kind of passing on some encouragement for nothing else, if nothing else there in that moment. But
yeah, a little bit of caution.
And a little bit of caution. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
But it's interesting too, because he does turn into a Force ghost. Or, well, hold on. I don't want to go so far yet. We'll leave that open.
He disappears.
He disappears, right. And again, if you go to StarWars.com in the episode guide for this one, they actually talk about this. It says it is completely intentional that the Father is the only one of the three Force wielders that vanishes upon his death, as Obi-Wan and Yoda do. So that was purposeful. They did that for a reason. And I guess the natural question that we should ask is, what did he become? Everything that we know from canon states that you can only become a Force ghost if you are aligned with the light side. And I think you mentioned that earlier. I think there's good reason to believe that he was aligned with the light prior to going neutral, if he really truly is neutral. But if he is not pure light, he is not, the good side, and he is true neutral, where do those beings go? What do they become? If they're not Force ghosts, right? Any thoughts?
Right. Well, and this speaks to the great conversation we had with Utini in Discord of what does balanced really mean? Does balanced mean you have equal parts light and dark, or is it something else entirely? And I liked kind of where he was going with it of this idea that it's you do good, but you're doing good in a way that's not. It's not negatively influencing those around. You're not forcing people to do one thing or the other, and because that starts to lead to seeds of corruption, right? And that starts to take you off this balanced path. So it's really bigger than light and dark, if you will. And so for the Father, it's interesting because I think we can talk about this, especially when we see Anakin control the children. I think I want to dig into this a little bit more, but I don't know that we ever see him behave in a dark way. And for him to maintain balance over his children, or control over his children, rather, he has to himself be balanced. And I tend to agree with Utini's view of this, where that tends to mean that you are firmly in the light. And I think this is George Lucas's intent too, from everything that he shared in a lot of the interviews that he did, especially when we had the special editions and some of the DVD releases and the prequels in particular. This type of theme kept coming up, that the light side is the balance, if you will. So if we use George's perspective on that, then he's already, skewed, if you will, towards the light, even if he's still balanced and able to, control both aspects of the Force, if you want to look at it that way. So I tend to think that he was that way. And I believe that he probably would be a Force ghost, given that what we saw on screen and We didn't see him do well. I take that back. I mean, how he treated Anakin and put the position Anakin was in, there's some ambiguity there, to be fair. But what do you think?
Yeah, this one's tough for me. Part of me wants to, because I like the character, I like the father. There's an element of him that I particularly like that has nothing to do with the Force. It has nothing to do with balance. And it's this aspect of him that as a father, he can't pick his children. He loves the son as awful as he can be, as corrupt as he is, as much as he loves the daughter. And as a parent, as a father, that's what we strive to be. And I always joke around that, oh yeah, we all have our favorites. But the reality is, I like that aspect of him that apart from all of that, I think he is just a father first and foremost. I'm taking him at face value that he really is the father of these two people, by the way. But first and foremost, he is a father, and he's not able to kind of pick those sides. So in that aspect, I like the fact that he's balanced there, right? He's trying to maintain a balance that has nothing to do with the Force, nothing to do with prophecies or any of that stuff. But so that nature of him makes me want to believe that he is a good-natured person because of that alone, and therefore him passing on, he does go to the Force Ghost. However, I really do believe that he is just neutral. I think even with everything I just said about him being a father, I think there's something more, there's something greater here in the Force and his duties to the Force that supersede all of that. And so from that aspect, I think that maybe over time he has become truly neutral, and he's not able to, he's almost kind of, he's almost got paralysis in terms of what he's able to actually execute upon. Well, because he's not he's too far from the light. He's too far removed from the dark. And from that regard, I would say that if he did pass on, the only thing I could see him doing is basically going back into the Force, becoming one with the Force, the cosmic Force itself, right? Where he lives, and maybe he's still able to commune and who knows what in the World Between Worlds or other areas like Dagobah or Mortis or anything else. Later on, he's able to do all that. But he's not technically a Force ghost, right? He's not a physical presence that would appear. I think that's a higher level of achievement that the light users, Jedi, whoever it be, are able to attain. But I don't know that anybody below that, apart from somebody that's true neutral, can really get to. I think the best he could do is become a voice or some kind of guiding spirit in some way that can't really be seen physically, right? It doesn't manifest in that way. So that's kind of where my thought is.
That's an interesting take on it. I think, I'm not disagreeing with the cosmic Force and all of that. I think you're right on the money there. I just believe that he, in order to do all of that and actually retain his presence, he still has to be more aligned with the light side in that capacity. And again, I think he's about as close to balance as we've seen, because the one thing that he put responsibility and duty above his love for his children was to the galaxy and the universe, to, at least in his opinion, whether we believe him or not, was to help maintain balance across the universe. And so that was the one thing that, of course, that was his greatest pain too, was loving his children so much and knowing that they could tear the very fabric apart.
And that's
and that he had to put them in this situation in order to protect the galaxy really from his children.
So I agree 100% with you. And I think I truly believe that he had a bigger duty here. He understood what that was, and he was going to do what he was trying to fulfill all that. I do question though, why he was so willing to just let Anakin go. At the very,
I don't think he had any intention of letting Anakin go.
And that may be true, right? We don't know for sure, because the son got real selfish, even more selfish, and decided to take matters in his own hands. But yeah, you got to wonder how he was like, well, I can't make the decision for you. I mean, the whole weight of the galaxy and the universe is on your shoulders, but if you want to walk away, that's okay too. I mean, it just doesn't seem like
I tell you what,
he'd be okay with
you
that.
talk about like talking out of both sides of your mouth. Not you, but the father.
Well, I do that too, but yeah, go ahead.
You must let go of your guilt. But yet he is trying to guilt him into doing this.
True.
I mean, like blatantly trying to guilt him into doing this. So way to play on the insecurities there, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh man.
All right. Well,
I love this stuff.
Yeah. But yeah, so let's talk about Anakin and the Chosen One prophecy. And honestly, the next two topics could be shows of themselves, right? So I don't want to get too much into this, but there are some things here that are very relevant and poignant with regards to this one. But the first question I have is is Anakin really a suitable replacement for the father? And I'll let you take the first one here. Could he have really replaced the father?
No, I don't think so. Well, one, his head and his heart are not in the right place to begin with.
Agreed.
And I really question when he subdued the children. To me, this felt like him just exercising the power of the planet, and it was just raw power that was amplified by Mortis. Did you get that impression as well?
I kind of believe that he did do that. Like that was him. No. No. The easy answer is no, but go on and I'll let you finish your thought and then I'll come back and tell you my crazy stuff.
Yeah. And we've got some things a little bit later on, so I don't want to borrow too much, but just the dynamic of that scene with the sky, the rolling sky, everything goes dark. You have this very universal cosmic type of, pattern on the ground around them, like it was like the universe was around him. And it had and of course the shadows that they did, the animation was really cool and fun to watch on this one, was just very dark. The whole thing was just very, very dark. And so I got the impression that he may have been drawn because he was scared and he had fear and he was concerned for his friends and for his apprentice. So it's all of these things lined up of this is usually when Anakin starts reaching out into the power of the dark side in order to summon additional power, if you want to call it that, in order to make these things happen. Mm-hmm. And then he didn't just let them go. Then he had to really subdue them with force.
Yep.
And then what really sealed it for me, though, was he made them kneel.
Yes.
And of course, when the son kneeled, we got the Vader breathing in the background. Mm-hmm. It's really subtle, but it's there, so right when you see the son kneeling before he comes up, you hear Vader's breath, and all of those things lined up to me just screamed dark side. And so I was really surprised when the father was overjoyed. See, I knew it was you. You are the chosen one. You must understand it now, right? You see your destiny clearly, right? And it just threw me for a loop. I really expected to see rolling of light and dark, those types of things, but no, it was all dark.
Yeah. I think you pretty much took all my notes, so I got nothing to say. But no, I think so.
Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding. So on the basis of the question alone, is Anakin really suitable? Is he a suitable replacement for the father? I think inherently, based on his raw power and potential, yes, he's suitable from that aspect. I think what's not explicitly discussed is the burden and the mental maturity that would be needed in order for an individual to kind of fulfill everything that encompasses the mantle of the chosen, whatever that means, or the chosen, whatever that means. I think that's where Anakin was not ready and he's not prepared. Looking at his attachments and love for others just seems like it's a direct conflict of interest for someone who's going to be truly neutral and be able to kind of give all that up and just say, I'm going to stay right here and I'm never going back to Padme. I'm never, going to have children. All these visions of grandeur and all this love that I've had, I'm just going to toss all that away. There's no way in heck that guy's going to do that, right? He's just not, he doesn't have the capacity to even become so selfless that he would be able to kind of just jump into this role.
And that's my point. I think if he was able to do that, then my answer would, without question, be yes, that he would be suitable for it, because clearly he has the power to do it.
Yeah.
But everything it's got to be a total package. So I don't know how long the father really had to live. That wasn't really clear either.
No.
So if he was going to live for a while, could he be a mentor and a teacher or a master or something like that in order to help him along that path? And the answer is maybe, possibly, but it sure seemed like the father was, he was fading somewhat quickly. So I don't think that was going to be a reasonable expectation that he would have been around for years,
right?
Maybe months, something like that. Again, time is difficult on Mortis. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's probably some.
So, I agree with you. And I didn't mean to dodge the question, but it was just all those things made me think that the answer is right now, what we know about Anakin is consistently no. He's not a suitable replacement with the Anakin we know. Does he have the ability? Yes. Yeah. But he's unable to make the right choices to be a suitable replacement. Final answer.
So how was the father, how has the father maintained family and balance? And I don't know that we really know. All we know is that he picked up the kids, took them to Mortis to get away, and he's kept them from going too far in either direction. And with the Clone Wars and everything that's happening, obviously his son started gaining more power. That was unexpected, and hence the reach out to Anakin. And we know that they have some kind of, physical or metaphysical connection that's centered on the father. But apart from that, I don't know that we really got much in terms of, at least not from the storyline or anything that we were able to decipher why he was able to kind of keep them in balance. I mean, that's probably enough right there. Anything that you picked up on, though?
No, it's just more questions. I mean, we talked about this last week too, of at what point, if it was in the nature of the son to be selfish, at what point did that become problematic? Was that because of Anakin's presence, because of that summoning of them to the planet, or was it already happening?
Yeah.
And we don't get a day in the life to see what their normal day looked like, aside from being probably really boring and just getting restless about it. But, it's also coming of age. I mean, as you come older, you have frustrations because of lack of ability of doing things or lack of permission to do things, and that rebelling against authority. And, so maybe it's something really as simple and as human as that. But, when we show up on the planet and he's already looking pretty Sith-like, it's clear that something has already been happening, that we're just not we've stepped in the middle of something. And Obi-Wan says as much. We don't understand what's going on here. And that very much is talking like from the audience point of view.
Yeah.
We don't really know what is going on right here,
right.
But we've stepped into something that's kind of neat, but also pretty terrifying at the same time.
Let's go back to something you mentioned. You talked about, I guess, Anakin's guilt. And we talked earlier, I guess, in the last episode about, I forget now what the quote was at the beginning, the little fortune cookie thing. But it talks about guilt in one of these. And one of the things that I mentioned is that I really believe that at the heart of what's wrong with our characters in Star Wars boils down to this harboring of guilt, and ultimately what the weight of that guilt does to them. Anakin's guilt, Luke's guilt, Han's guilt, Kylo's guilt. It's all this guilt that drives many of these characters in Star Wars to do things that seem to be out of character or push them against our already kind of preconceived notions of what they should be like. And I think that unless you account for this, it can be really hard to get on board with who they become or what they're capable of doing. But we get an instance here where, I guess you said it really well. They're guilting Anakin into kind of becoming this chosen one. They're kind of putting this burden on him and saying, "Look, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen." And we see this even one step further with the son, when the son shows him visions of the future, and he gets to see the destruction of Alderaan. He sees Padme dying, and I think you hear Obi-Wan, you were like a brother to me, and again, whatever else is going on there. But I mean, that is like the ultimate guilt trip so far that Anakin doesn't even he doesn't even
hesitate.
Yeah, he doesn't hesitate, right? He doesn't even go. He doesn't try to go in the light towards the light. He actually decides to go to the dark in order to stop the dark, right? He's become so guilt-ridden he's so guilty now of all the stuff that's about to happen, that he feels like his only recourse at that point is to align with the sun and still go down a dark path, which just seems like for us, right, as rational human beings, well, me anyways, I don't know about you, but rational human beings, I don't know if that's even like, I can't even comprehend that. Like, he just doubles down almost right on the dark side with all this. But
yeah, and this was a similar conversation we had with Quinlan Voss in Dark Disciple, right? It just doesn't make sense. It's confusing why we think we can fix things by becoming the very thing that we're trying to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And that just doesn't make any sense to me either. And it's frustrating for these characters too, because again, you continue to see the guilt, you see what they're capable of, and they're just not capable of making a good decision. and it just really frustrates you. It makes them interesting too. But yeah, I don't understand why he would do that. And what was interesting was the conclusion he came to. It was that the Jedi will stand in the way of peace. We clearly don't see that on screen, but clearly he saw something in his vision of the Jedi not accepting peace. And that was the cause of his turn, I guess, maybe. And maybe that was what it is. If he's putting the blame of the Jedi, and he clearly did, even what we saw in Revenge of the Sith, laid at the feet of the Jedi and his friends. And that was why he, turned that way in the first place. And, he started to believe that the Jedi were the cause of all these problems in the galaxy. He just did it much sooner. So I just saw it as bringing the future forward, a whole year or so earlier than when it was supposed to happen.
You had a great question in here. Whether the sacrifice of the father was an example for Anakin. Do you believe that was him showing him a way there, showing him the ropes, or modeling behavior?
I think it was.
A way for,
yeah, I really do. Yeah, I think this is his way of showing that in order to, in order to bring balance there will be sacrifice.
Yeah. Which he
right?
clearly
in
does
order to
later.
control it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and we see this several times over. We saw this, to speak of Dark Disciple, we saw it with the Asajj Ventress, right?
Yeah.
And we see it over with Obi-Wan and then others as well. And it's just kind of, unfortunately, we have to kill people to learn a lesson or to sacrifice ourselves to teach a lesson. But I think it was an important thing for Anakin to witness and understand. And he also saw the giving of life from the daughter to Ahsoka. So I think these were lessons and opportunities for him to see and be a part of and witness these things of to really grow and to help him make better decisions later on. Of course, unfortunately, we never hear about this in the rest of the Clone Wars. We don't hear them talk about it. We don't know their perspectives after they leave this planet. Unfortunately, I mean, I think that was a big miss with the Clone Wars in general. And I kind of don't know why they did it, but that's pretty disappointing. We didn't get an extra piece of content there to help us decompress everything that we saw and to, unload in our mind a bit.
Yeah, they're just kind of like, oh, you wouldn't believe what happened to us. He, and, roll credits.
Right. But I mean, did you view that as something of hope that along those lines?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're talking about his sacrifice?
Yeah. And I mean, Anakin made a statement that there was always hope.
Right.
Right. This is skewing a little bit more towards Ahsoka.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it echoes, no one's ever really gone and they're still good in you. I mean, you could throw out all kinds of instances and quotes from all of the movies and TV shows where, there's this hope theme is kind of there, if not explicitly said. But yeah, right. I mean, I'm with you there. I thought it was a great question because I really think you're right. I think he was whether he meant to or not, I think that was a life lesson for Anakin to go through at the end of it all. And we got to remember his memory had been wiped at this point. So he had no thoughts of he didn't know Vader or any of that stuff that the son had shown him.
Right.
So I would agree. I think that was a way for the father, again, directly or indirectly, for him to kind of model behavior that was a precursor for, what Anakin would ultimately have to do in sacrificing his own life to save the son and ultimately restore balance to the Force.
But did you see it in another way too? Of his inability to let go of Ahsoka, and yet the father's willingness and the daughter's really willingness too, right? She really prompted this because I think the daughter was going to teach, or the father rather was going to have to teach Anakin because he had told him there's no hope, there's no chance, she's gone, and one of these lessons of you have to accept that. But then the daughter had to do her selfless act in order to resurrect her of sorts. And
which was true to her
I almost
character,
thought that
right?
was counter. It was, but I thought it was counterproductive. So I'm curious why the father let it happen, aside from it being his daughter's last wish.
Why he allowed the daughter to kind of transfer her force?
Yes, it seems contrary to what he would. It seems contrary to what he would have wanted, because again, the whole balance of the Force, the cosmic Force, the interactions, seems like he would have really subscribed to all of that by this point.
Yeah,
and it threw me a little bit of confusion there.
Yeah, I don't know, and this may be this may not be right. It probably isn't. But the thing about Mortis is, if you, for the sake of argument, and you assume that all of them are in balance because they all exist, the minute one of them dies, it almost feels like the others have to go as well, because you're out of balance unless somehow they can replace, like the father was trying to do, unless you could fulfill someone else, right? Once a daughter died, maybe it's Ahsoka, maybe it's someone else, whoever you want to throw in there to kind of take on the mantle of representing the light, then that would restore the balance. But without that, it almost feels like they all have to go. And this is where I'm probably wrong, but there may be some aspect of the father that at that point, the son was gone. He knew he was certainly going to be gone because he had, taken the sword. He had already been stabbed by his own sword, had been stabbed by Anakin's lightsaber, didn't have much life left in him. Had his daughter continued to live, that would have been unbalancing. And so really it was just kind of like this, zero-sum game where at this point the only recourse left was to, she's got a little bit of life in her. She probably could live, but you know what? That's going to be, I'm dead, son's dead, things are going to be out of balance. Let's get your life force back over into Ahsoka and we can all just, pretend like this never happened.
Right. We saw it with the planet too, the physical manifestation of the planet. As soon as she passed, the planet started falling apart as well.
Mm-hmm.
It succumbed to darkness. We started to see things die. And so I'm right there with you. I think this is a case where once one piece fell, the rest of the dominoes have to go with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right. Good conversation. Let's talk about, in the time that we got left, let's talk a little bit about balance of the Force. And for this section, I wanted to focus on the symbolism of the balance that we see throughout the episode, rather than turning this into a debate about what balance means. Although we've kind of talked about it, directly, indirectly, directly in these two episodes. But I really want to just, maybe we could go back and do an updated show on the balance of the Force. I think the guys did it at one point a long time ago. But I think, given all the stuff that's happened, especially with like Last Jedi and everything, it's probably time that we come back and revisit the topic, the balance of the Force. But But just on the symbolism, and this will be really quick, but there's just throughout the episode, and this is one of the things that really just fascinates me about it. There are all kinds of things if you look for them. And I can't help but think 99.9% of all this was intentional.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, but so start with like the symbol of Mortis, the symbol of Mortis that you see all over the place, whether it's in the cathedral or on the ground, wherever it is. They've got the merging of those ancient symbols of the dark and the light, dark being the Bogan and light being the Ashal, right? So they've overlaid these symbols right on top of each other. And you see those throughout the episode, but symbolically, that's kind of an implied balance, right? You got to have both of them there. Right. In the sanctuary, you've got the Father's throne. It's flanked by these two statues of his children who represent both light and dark. His throne itself, it looks like a scale.
Looks like a scale.
And like it's balancing both, the light and dark on each side. I think the symbols are there. Look at the color palettes of the characters themselves. The sun is, we've talked about this, but the sun is in dark tones. He's in dark colors. He looks like a Sith. The daughter's bathed in this glowing light. And then you've got the father he's kind of a hot mess. I mean, he's all drab and just gray. He really is just kind of neutral, right? So even from a character design, they went so far to kind of represent that. We talked about the weather conditions and the day and night, the death and rebirth of the planet. There's balance there.
That was my favorite part of it.
Yeah. They did visually. It's a really cool thing. And it's so subtle because the characters are walking and you're listening and focused on what they're talking about. And yet in the background, there's a lot of stuff happening, whether stuff's dying or whether stuff's being reborn. But maybe the most interesting thing for me was in the courtyard of the cathedral. On the ground, we get almost what looks like the yin yang symbol with the light and dark symbols right in the middle. They've got the same thing. The Ashal and the Bogan symbols are right there in the middle of it all. And there's more of that kind of ties to The Last Jedi, which I think we'll talk about when we get to the legacy of Mortis. But that always stood out to me, even back then, even prior to obviously The Last Jedi, but just the way that look of having that yin yang symbol there. But just really great stuff with the balance there. So that's kind of the highlights I had. Did you have anything else that?
I think you captured most of them there. I think those were the ones that jump out to you the easiest. And again, the planet and the way that they describe the planet, death gives way to renewed life. So just the way that they describe how these, how the Force is always renewing itself and dying and decaying, and a really good explanation, I think, that we also got in the Lost Missions about how the Force works and what that cycle looks like. So I was really happy to see that. Those are the moments I really enjoy about the series.
Yeah, there's a great quote from the Father. He says, it is only here that I can control them, his family. He says, a family in balance, the light and the dark, day with night, destruction replaced by creation. Too much light or dark would be the undoing of life as you understand it. And I can't help but think, again, of The Last Jedi and Luke's, Rey's first lesson with Luke. Again, it just echoes all of that as well. So we know, again, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, we know Rian Johnson watched the Mortis Arc in particular in preparation as he was writing or in the process of writing The Last Jedi. And you got to think that this is some of the stuff that he was pulling from when he kind of came up with some of the stuff that we saw there.
Yeah, and it had some different perspectives come as a result of watching this, and especially as many times as I watched it. And so we'll have to come back to that a little bit another time and talk a little bit more about Luke's exile and what that means in balance.
All right, well, let's talk about Qui-Gon, because we got to talk about Qui-Gon. We haven't really had a chance. But before we do, I got to ask your opinion on whether or not you felt like Qui-Gon Jinn was really there, or do you subscribe to the Mike Rondo theory that really was never Qui-Gon Jinn and was either the father or the son, the daughter, somebody else?
Yeah, we got in trouble by the Lord Emperor Mike Rondo on our assessment last week.
I still stand by mine, but go ahead. I'm curious what you think.
I see his point about why it would be the father, but the thing is, we know that Qui-Gon's spirit still lives now, and you could argue that the only way that we're able to see Qui-Gon is because this is a very special. This might be the birthplace of the Force,
yes,
right?
Yep.
So that's the only reason why we might be able to see him. Now, I would argue the counter to that is in Lost Missions. It's very clear from Qui-Gon that he can't manifest himself because his training was incomplete, even though that place was presumably very strong in the Force as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're a little contradictory there, but we could argue that this place is so strong that that's the reason why we can't see him. At first, I really did believe this was Qui-Gon. And the more I thought about it, I can understand where Mike was coming from. I just don't know if I 100% believe it. And this is the difficult thing, or this is the fun thing, I guess, too, is there's good reasoning on both sides of the fence as to why it's either way. It definitely fits with the father. And if you believe that the sister was talking to Ahsoka, the son was speaking to Anakin, then the father must be the one speaking to Obi-Wan as more of the sage father-like figure of the group. But to me, the other thing you can speak to is that, these beings can see their thoughts. They can see their history. They could see their pain, and they could see the things that bring them joy. So presumably they know Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, and Anakin as well as they know themselves. So, but I still believe, I think it still was Qui-Gon. Sorry, Mike.
Well, yeah. So here are my thoughts. And again, I'm with you. I can see where there's a strong argument to be made that this is not Qui-Gon Jinn and that it is indeed the father. But I have a question about that I'll come back to in a second. But so first off, I think one of the red herring here, I think, is the line of "I am here because you are here." You take that line at face value, and that could imply that he's a figment of Obi-Wan's mind or consciousness. Or, earlier there's a quote in there where the father says, "We can take many forms. The shapes we embody are merely a reflection of the life force around us." Right.
Right.
That's enough to probably to throw someone into a mindset of, okay, that's really not him. And right. Given the way the episodes have played out, this is not the first time we're seeing a manifestation of something that really shouldn't be there. And in all the previous instances, we know very clearly that it was the son that was doing it, or the daughter, right? So
right, and the camera angles they're doing all during this time, make it seem very almost horror inspired, of spirits coming in and out of this cave. So you're right, like you said, there's a lot of suggestive that these are not natural.
The other thing that makes me wonder, or I guess the other thing I would challenge with regards to this being the father, is if you look at the context of the conversation that he's having as Qui-Gon Jinn with Obi-Wan Kenobi, if it really is the father, I don't know what the purpose of that conversation serves. There's nothing in their exchange that benefits any of the Celestials in any way. It's very surface level. Hey, how are things going? Just checking in on you. It's almost like he's asking Obi-Wan to bear his testimony on the prophecy and the potency of Anakin Skywalker. And I don't see how that, and it's not a long conversation that they have, right? It's just really more Anakin. It's the best thing or the most poignant thing that we get out of this is Obi-Wan confirming that, I think you were right, dude. He is the chosen one, and I've really tried my best to train him, and I'm so sorry, but he's just so strong-willed, and that kind of thing. It was almost like he's, again, bearing his testimony of him as a failure, and how he's starting to have fear almost that he's not doing what he thought he could do, or what Qui-Gon wanted him to do. again, I don't see how any of that really benefits the father in any way, much less any of the son or anyone else that you could.
Well, and then why would Qui-Gon say that if he is not the chosen one, then this is a very dangerous place for him? If he can't find balance in that, there's a very dangerous place. That's another line that just confused me as to, again, what purpose would that serve? If that was the father, why would he leave it on such an ambiguous, statement?
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of baffled me that it wouldn't be Qui-Gon, as much as I know it doesn't make sense for it to be Qui-Gon. The way that it was the conversation itself that turned me off from it being the father.
And I guess the other two, the smaller things, and maybe they're not, maybe they're actually more significant than those, is the fact that we see Qui-Gon manifested as a spirit ghost, whereas the other characters that they manifested themselves as were like physical form type things. They looked like they were there in the flesh, where Qui-Gon's this kind of translucent spirit ghost thing. And yeah, I am of the opinion that Mortis isn't like Dagobah. Mortis isn't like, the world between worlds, or Mortis isn't like the other where Yoda went during the Lost missions when he was talking to the 5 female Force thingies, right? I think that they clearly state that this is the nexus of the Force, that everything, the entire Force, goes through this one thing. And if there's any one place that you would think, even though Qui-Gon's not able to manifest himself other places, and like he says in those Lost missions, this would be the one place. I think you get an out here because it is so powerful. I think it's that much. I think it's on a totally different level than anything else that we've seen in Star Wars, at least up until this point. And that's why he's able to kind of have a physical presence, if you will.
So let's fast forward to his appearance later in the episode then.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still have the same opinion of the second time we see Qui-Gon? Is that still him, or is that one of the others?
I still believe it's him. Because
see, on that one, that's where I started doubting myself.
Wavering.
Yeah,
like why
wavering,
would? Sorry, yeah.
I started wavering. Like, why would he send Anakin to the well of the dark side? What purpose does that serve? To me, that was either another test, or that was just saying, no, we're going to go here and we're going to, the son is going to ultimately corrupt him now.
Yeah.
But remember your training. Again, it's just so ambiguous. And at first I thought, okay, well, that might be the father, tempting him or telling him to go down that path. But then I was like, it could just as easily be the son, because the son, of course, was there. So that one confused me. That's where I started really doubting which it was, a Qui-Gon or was it one of the Celestials?
Yeah. I mean, maybe you could, I don't know. You could theorize that was something Qui-Gon felt he needed to learn. He needed to see the future because he knew he had the foresight to know that the father would erase it. And, I don't know. Again, I get what you're saying, though. So let's say he even saw that. Then why put him through it to begin with? Right? It doesn't make sense that he would send him to the well of the dark side. Maybe there's a higher lesson there. I don't know. This is the part that part for me is probably the most ambiguous piece of it all, and why if it really is him, why did he send him there? And I'm with you there. I could probably waver a little bit there and say, well, okay, maybe that wasn't him, but I truly feel like it was him in the first one. I'm not so clear on this one though.
Yeah. And that's exactly where I'm at. I still feel like he was the first one, but this one seemed like someone jerking with Anakin's chain. Yeah.
The part that doesn't jive with that, and I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but even like it's a tale of two stories in that, and just in that small scene between him and Anakin. The very first part of it feels very sincere, very real. He's asking, he's talking to him, hey, how are you doing? He's almost encouraging you. You got to believe that you are the chosen one, right? And then it turns into, okay, now go to this well of soul, Raiders of the Lost Ark, well of the dark side, and you're going to see some horrible things and that kind of thing. I guess the counter argument to that first part of it, in him encouraging him to believe in him, is because if Anakin doesn't believe that he is the chosen one, then that does not benefit the son in any way, right? He needs him to be able to, one, take out Obi-Wan, take out Ahsoka, get off the planet, and so that they can go and live their happy lives together. So I don't know, this, and all of this,
and from the father's perspective, for it to still be the father for that second encounter with Qui-Gon, it doesn't seem to serve any purpose.
True.
At that point,
yeah.
Right? Because at this point, the chosen one doesn't matter. Things have gone down a path, and it's just got to be resolved. There's no debate left. There's no place for him in that world.
All right, let's wrap this up on our last topic, which is the legacy of Mortis. And so we want to just kind of focus on where we are now and, maybe what's to come. But I guess the question right off the top here is whether or not the galaxy is better or worse off now that the family is gone. Or did we just maintain status quo? Was it a zero-sum game all over?
Yeah, the Father basically tells us that the latter is true, that we have maintained balance in the galaxy. Because at one point when his daughter died, of course, this is where you have to believe that time is marching on at a different pace than what we were seeing on screen at Mortis, that the Empire is well on its way to formation and is probably already in place. Mm-hmm. So the dark side has taken over, the Emperor is in place, so on and so forth. But by leveling out the playing field and by, killing everyone, we no longer have this imbalance, and we can go back to our normal timeline and say, okay, the future is still yet to be completely determined. And so I think we're still pretty much in a status quo. Now, one thing that's maybe an interesting conversation is, are we really, I don't know that we're not better off. We know that for certain. But the question is, would we still be better off if the Father was in place? Again, knowing he was going to pass, but what impact did this really have on the galaxy for this family to be intact? Was it really influencing the universe and the galaxy to maintain balance, or was it really going to skew one way or the other? Because we already saw on screen that the seeds of the Empire, the seeds of the dark side were already being planted to create imbalance. So what does that actually, how does that translate to how this family was operating? And again, we could still argue time. Time is anytime you put time travel and things like that in the mix, it's hard to really stay focused and comprehend it.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think this is what you were saying. It's what I have in my notes as well. I almost verbatim everything you've just said, but it's almost like they were there for a reason. And whether they did nothing structurally, if you will, they did something for the universe, the galaxy, the Force, right? And now they're gone. There's a hole there because they're no longer there. So what are the ramifications of that? And I don't know that we can point to any one thing, right? But it just feels like without their presence, if they were keeping things together and now they're gone, even though it may on the surface look like a net zero here, nothing changes. We're back to status quo. You got to think fundamentally, foundationally, something has changed either in the galaxy or with the Force, or tides are turning, who knows what. But it just feels like there had to have been some kind of a ripple effect by not having their presence there, because they were doing something, right? They were upholding something in some way with the Force and balance and all that.
Yeah, and a bit of a rhetorical question is there a reason why they would reinsert themselves back into the universe and the galaxy at large? Would there be some event that would actually force them to feel that it was necessary to reintegrate with the rest of the galaxy? And I don't have an answer for that. I don't even have a speculation on that one. But it was just curious if, could things get bad enough to where they would come back to try to balance it in some way? Because presumably they have the power to do so.
So one of the cooler things, and Mortis does a good job of this, and there's so many great examples. We've talked about a number of them here on the show in recent episodes, but we've got more of these mind warping concepts. Will of the Force versus destiny versus change your future, and we get a heavy dose of it here in the Mortis arc, which is all great. I know there are a lot of folks out there that have very clean and draw lines about what happened, what didn't happen. I don't know that I'm so sure on any of that. Like you said in the last show, this arc, even as much as it's been discussed, now here and anywhere else, still leaves quite a bit open and kind of nebulous around how the Force works, specifically when it comes to the will of the Force versus, controlling the Force and moving target of like foresight and Force visions. We get all of that in this arc. And then even after the Mortis arc in the Lost Missions, Twilight of the Apprentice, Family Reunion, and Farewell from Rebels, the sagas, the standalone movies. I think at the end of the day, I still subscribe to the Chirrut Imwe and Anakin Skywalker point of view that all is as the Force wills it. I still truly believe that even after all of that, I'm on the side that the Force is the Force, and it is you. Even as much as you may be able to control certain aspects, in the grand scheme of things, you don't control anything. It's allowing that stuff to happen. It acquiesces and allows some of that stuff to happen because it's minute in nature or insignificant in the grand its bigger plans. I really think and truly believe that this is just kind of one of those things, like even our own real concepts, that stuff's just going to happen. You can't change it. You can't change your destiny. You can't change your fate. All is as the Force wills, kind of thing. So anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on it. But do you think Mortis, this particular arc, changed your view on any of this stuff, or are you just as confused as ever?
No, I think what you said is right. Generally speaking, the way that Star Wars is set up and the way what we see time and time again is even your ability to change your future seems to be only temporary.
Yeah. It's short-lived, right?
You can change the way you get there, but you still have to get there eventually. You might even change the timeline of when you get there.
Sure.
But you still get there. And I think that's what we see with time and time again, is that the Force will get all of us there in some way. And your destiny is more or less set. But what's curious is the interpretations of those types of things, the interpretation of destiny, and the pushing of others' views on one another about what those are, especially with destiny and about what your future is and what you're supposed to do. And I think that's the conflict within the TV shows, the movies, the books, everything that makes this so interesting is really that conflict that comes about of each of us collectively, because we're all in Star Wars now. Congratulations, everyone. Yeah. Of what we think everyone should be doing and what you're worth, and how that gets interpreted and how that gets valued, and across a variety of scenarios. I think that's one of the common themes we keep seeing just presented, and Anakin and Luke, and now to an extent, Ben, Kylo, and Rey, of how those stories play out and what's expected of them and what their role is at large, and how we view it and how we misinterpret it, makes for really fun and interesting conversations. I think that's really cool. But so it didn't really change it. It probably solidified a little bit more for me. Again, this concept of somewhat of a stream of the Force, and it's going to take you where you got to go. But no matter how many bumps you go along the way, you're still going to get where you're supposed to be.
So kind of in that same vein, the question of whether or not the power of foresight is a tool of the dark side. I don't believe it's exclusive to them, but they do seem to be more in tune with it than the light side users are. I think in canon, Yoda seems to be very much able to use this power, but with a lot of, a lack of clarity and consistency. He seems very hesitant, and that may just be wisdom on his part, right? He may have seen a million visions of the future and knows that, only very few of those actually come out and pan out the way they're supposed to for different reasons. But we do get a sense that, he's able to do it and does it with quite a bit of frequency, I would say. But we get the strongest use of foresight in this episode in the brother that we talked about, in his ability to kind of show, again, very, very clear, concrete visions to Anakin. And it's probably a combination of his power, the planet of Mortis itself, the well of the dark side, right? The combination of those three probably is able to kind of amplify his foresight, or the ability of foresight for him to kind of paint a picture with such clarity that we've never really kind of seen before. But it's interesting because after all that happens, when Anakin falls to his knees, he says that he's going to cause, I forget now, so much pain or whatever. Right. And he asks him, will we bring peace? He asks the son, after I've seen all this, I'm going to do some horrible things. Are we at least going to bring peace? And it kind of echoes the conversation with Vader and Luke on Bespin, where Vader tells Luke that the Emperor has foreseen all of this and that together they can join forces and kind of rule the galaxy. Right? It's almost kind of a switch off there. At least it reminds me, anyways, of that switch off on Bespin, where he's trying to persuade him that, hey, the Emperor has already foreseen all of this is going to happen. You're gonna, your horrible things are about to happen, but if you join me together, we can stop that and we can end this destructive conflict and bring peace to the galaxy, right? Whatever the line is, sorry, but
right.
It's just, it seems like that kind of hit me as a kind of a shade of that. But anyways, your thoughts on, I guess, the Force Sight and dark side users?
Yeah, I think somewhat with the light side, it's more a restraint and a respect for it. And I think this case is really unique, though, because as the father said, the son warped the rules of time. So he bent the rules, the universal rules somehow in order to do this. And actually, this gave me a bit of a Legends flashback. If you remember Jason Solo, I believe it was Jason that was able to do, what was it called? Flow walking. Yeah, it gave me a little bit of a flavor for that, watching the scene with Anakin and all of the visions and what was to come, and the smoky, the clouds, and all this other stuff, effects with it all, and it really gave me that moment of, I don't know, maybe fond a little bit, a little crazy on some sort of the old Legends novels of what they could do, but yeah, generally speaking, it's not a tool of the dark side. I kind of posed it as somewhat of a fun question because it seems like all the really bad stuff that happens usually has some sort of foresight involved. But we've seen it, like you said, we see it with Yoda, but it's really more about restraint. And I think that respect of the future and knowing that it is in motion and it is emotion and it can change somewhat and how you get there, but it's best not to know too much about your own future. Now I feel like I'm quoting Back to the Future. So again, messing with time.
Yeah. Rebels and Last Jedi connections, and I'll kind of make this quick because there are, obviously some tie-ins that we get a little bit later, and probably the biggest one that we get up front in the Rebels series is this the Convor that we see tied with Ahsoka. For those of you,
right.
Yeah. So, and this is where I remember now. I think we have somebody actively an active user in our Discord who's going through and watching Rebels. I forget now who it is. So if you're listening, spoilers, don't listen to this because I'm going to spoil some things that you're about to hear or see very soon. But
you've been warned.
What's that?
You've been warned.
Yeah. So, so the Convors are the little birds, and we kind of see that. I think we first saw it in, was it Twilight of the Apprentice? I don't know. Anyway, it's definitely
Twilight
there.
Of the Apprentice.
Yeah,
right.
And that particular Convor looks like the daughter. And so we've got little things here and there on social media from Dave Filoni as the series went on. He was kind of, every once in a while it would pop up, and he kind of alluded to that there was something more. He went so far, and when someone asked him at one point, he said, in some ways, I could say that it's a messenger, talking about the Convor. It's an observer. It is definitely something, and I would rather have fans debate, but I would suggest to say that whatever that thing is, an avatar of, has actually appeared in the animated Star Wars universe before. So it was almost a confirmation without a confirmation that this was really the daughter. And there's definitely a tie here, obviously, with her Force going into her. Now she's part of her is in Ahsoka, and maybe that has come about in the way of this little familiar now that follows Ahsoka around from time to time.
We pretty much get confirmation of that in World Between Worlds.
Yes. Yeah.
Where she said she owes her life to Morai.
Yeah. And we'll just go there because later on, fast forward to Rebels, with the Doom episode, where we get the White Wolf kind of throws that tablet out in front of Ezra, and you've got the three hands on there, and that just sent everybody into a frenzy because we got the trailer right afterwards, and who was right in the trailer? It was Mortis all over again. And so there was a lot of speculation about, okay, are we going back to Mortis? How significant? Are we going to see the father? Are we going to see the son? Do they live? And at the end of the day, it was really more of a cameo more than anything. And maybe that's not the best word to use. It's a word that comes to mind now, but they didn't have a huge role in it. I did like it, though. I liked that they were kind of like the gatekeepers, right, of the World Between Worlds. And I especially liked at the very end when it was all kind of crumbling down. The last, the father went down, or I guess I forget the sequence, but I think the daughter went down first, right? And then the son went down.
Head.
And then the last thing we see is the father going down. And in my mind, he's kind of smirking like, see you later, suckers. You'll never see this again kind of thing.
And he kind of does the giant hand clap to close everything.
Yeah.
Thought that was really, the way they depicted that was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. But yeah, that was kind of all we got in terms of cameos again. So I guess the last question before we head out is, do you think we'll ever see the Mortis family again.
Oh boy. As much as I think I would like to, I really don't think we will.
Yeah.
We might see symbolism elsewhere, but I just don't know. I mean, when you look at a cartoon like Resistance now, you have a hard time seeing how it would fit unless, again, they ended up in some place where it happened to be a nexus again, and they stumble over something they don't understand and they kind of ignore it. Kind of very Indiana Jones-ish, if you will.
Yeah.
But I just really don't see how it fits, to be honest with you. I think there was a lot of buildup as to what we would see in Last Jedi, and I don't hear near as much of that now with Episode 9. And maybe that's because 8 kind of turned everything on its head, but it's really hard to see how we get there and how that would benefit the story and how that would really help to wrap our stories up or give us a new perspective. I think this is even an area that a comic or a book would really struggle to do more with. I mean, it almost has to be a prequel, obviously, but I don't think I want to see a comic of that. And maybe the book could do something justice if you got the right author to do it. But yeah, this is a really difficult one to tell because it's so ingrained with George Lucas specifically and Dave Filoni as its shepherd, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so without Lucas specifically and without that pair, I mean, and Filoni gave a lot of credit to his team as well. And I'm not taking anything away from them, but let's just be honest. This is George with Dave helping usher this thing across the finish line. And without them to do that, if it weren't them doing it, I'm curious if it would be as meaningful for us.
Yeah, I'm with you there. 100%. I'm not so sure. I mean, if you look back at Star Wars Legends and just lore in general, you know that there's kind of this ebb and flow that exists, but where we get periods of high Force usage, and then we get periods where Force isn't so prevalent and strong, that kind of thing. But by canon standards, and taking into account the Skywalker saga, we've been in periods with, I'm using air quotes here, but without the Force since Order 66, right? After Order 66, we really haven't. We're kind of in this period where the Force doesn't exist. Their fire has burned out, as Tarkin said. So I think I'm kind of with you. I think in order for Mortis to kind of come back and be of any real relevance, we really need to be in a period where the Force is strong, or there's just this mysticism or mystique about the Force it's being practiced again, and it's prevalent and dominant in society and that kind of thing.
It's almost got to tell the story of their withdrawal.
Yeah,
for it to be really interesting. Yeah.
But then again, maybe there's a side story in somewhere where Luke comes across the Mortis family after Jedi, and maybe he learns about what his father went through during this time, or because we know Luke was from Battlefront 2. He was going around and he was almost an archaeologist of sorts, trying to collect things and learn and all that stuff. So I don't know, maybe there's a comic there or something, some kind of side story. I just don't see.
That's a good point. It doesn't have to be the story. Right. It can be a part of a story.
Yeah.
Right? That's a good point.
But I think but you're right. I think there needs to be a Force user, and there's got to be some way to kind of link those two. I don't see it happening in Resistance and that kind of thing. I'm with you there. It's going to be hard to do. And I think you hit the nail on the head. Unless Filoni and Lucas or Lucas are behind this in some way, I don't know what the potency is going to be, and I don't know how fans are going to react or whatever. I mean, a good story is a good story at the end of the day. So yeah, who knows?
But this story is George Lucas.
It is.
I mean, that's the thing.
Yep.
But anyway,
well,
good discussion.
That was fun and a little long. Yeah. So we apologize in advance for those of you that like to get out of here in an hour.
We hope it was worth it, though.
Yeah, hopefully it was worth it. All right, so that's going to do it for the Mortis coverage. And before we go, we got a couple shout outs. We got some stuff already. Feedback's already been coming in for the first episode that we did last week, and it's all been really positive. So thank you guys for being able jumping into social media and Discord and wherever else you've gone and given some great feedback on it. But we do want to call it a couple of Aaron Segura. Sorry, let me use my native tongue here. I love this. I just started watching the Clone Wars TV series for the first time, and these episodes really stood out to me. I also like the What If podcast episode. So we got one person that liked that one.
Check.
Aaron Baker on Facebook also absolutely love this episode. I love the Mortis episodes when I watch them on Netflix. Can't wait for part 2. Thank you so much. Hopefully this one was just as good as the first one. And lastly was Jay Bishop. He says, I'm glad you guys are doing this topic. We know so little about the Force, and this is one of the few times Disney/Lucasfilm has expanded on the Force beyond how Jedi and Sith view it. So
yeah, I agree with the latter part there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you guys. And thanks to everybody. Those are just some of the ones that we've got. But thank you guys for all of the great feedback around this episode.
Some of my favorites that we get either on Discord or some of the other social media channels is when people either want to go rewatch the episodes or they go watch them for the first time.
Yeah.
And we can kind of open that gateway for people to go and experience something new or to re-experience it. So that's a lot of fun. So if you haven't watched these in a while, as always, go back and give them a watch because they're really well done and they make you think and they're just enjoyable.
And just remember, that is Qui-Gon Jinn the very first time you see him. All right.
That's right.
Last thing before we go, we've got some news around the network.
Yeah.
You want to tee that up?
Yeah, we're proud to announce that we've got a new show as part of the Earglue Media Network, and that is Simply Stogies, which is by our very own James Geem, who you better know as Crowley from Bad Gamers Anonymous, has participated on The Basement as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so he has released his first episode. It's a cigar smoking podcast where he talks about cigars, about etiquette, things that are important to you. And it's a passion of his, and we're super excited to keep adding new shows to the network. So I encourage you to go over to eargluemedia.com, check it out, or look it up on your favorite podcatcher. It's called Simply Stogies. So support Crowley, and we'd love to get your feedback on that show.
I had no idea what a stogie was until he told me to.
You're such a Boy Scout.
No idea what it was. I do now.
Literally.
Yeah. All right. All right. That's going to do it for this show. We'll put all the links for social media and how to support us in there. Please leave us good comments, feedback if you guys feel it's appropriate. We always love that. Join us on Discord. And next week, we're going to be kind of pulling the covers back, opening up the body bag of Order 66. Sorry, was that too soon? I don't know. But yeah,
it's never too soon.
Never too soon. So we'll be doing that next week. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks for joining us and take care.
See you.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.